1920s all about?
Well, the 1920s, that was like right after the war, right, World War I. And so basically, like, I guess, this is what my history teacher said. He said that the 1920s, like the early 1920s, was sort of like the hangover of the war. And like people, they would wake up and they're like, what have we done, you know? Oh my God, we gave women the right to vote, and like we had prohibition and income tax, and there were all these social changes, you know? And then eventually, you know, they were just freaking out, but eventually they sort of calmed down. They're like, oh, you know, we have money, and start to relax a little bit about alcohol because like it became more acceptable because there were these things called speakeasies and you had to like say a secret password to get in, and then you could get all this illegal alcohol.
Password? Shipper Lemon.
Women were able to really express themselves more. Everyone were able to go to, you know, certain places, say a password, you know, get some alcohol.
Because there were these things called bootleggers, and they'd bring alcohol in from illegally and sell it, and so it became sort of classier. So women were more for it at this point than against it.
Making eyes like we used to do when the moon is on the wane. Still I'm waiting all in vain. Should be swinging down the lane with you.
Get a little crazy. It was a good time. It was a good time.
Women started to get like really, really liberated, you know? They were like, you know, they used to be much more conservative and stuff, but they would go out and they'd be partying and drinking. They would like form relationships with their husbands that they didn't really have before, you know? Before it was more like, now they actually, you know, they cared about each other. They also felt better now that they had the right to vote, even though not many women actually exercise their right to vote.
Well, the 1920s, well, their name obviously set aside the Roaring Twenties, was a time of celebration, basically. The boys obviously just came home from the war, and now they're ready to just stay home and have a good time, drink some alcohol, do the Charleston, dance to some crazy new jazz music. It was just a time to really have fun.
Do you have any other comments on the 1920s?
I guess, like, let me think of, like, some random facts that, like, I know. Like, I guess, I didn't know this, but, like, supposedly there was, like, a really tiny recession after the war, and it only lasted 7 months, and it was between August of 1918 and March of 1919, and that was kind of cool, because I didn't know. And then also, there was the Immigration Act of 1921, which put a restriction on immigration so that only 3% of people from a certain nation could enter the country based on the 1910 census, and also the National Origins Act of 1924 followed it, and it put a limit so that only 2% could come in based on the 1890 census, and this was actually directed at Asian and Southern and Eastern European immigrants, so they kind of didn't want them in our country. So, tell us what isolationism is.
Isolationism is basically the way America acted in their foreign policy during the 1920s. This isolationism is basically post-World War I policy. During World War I, they were involved with their first total war with other countries, and after it kind of scared America, and they didn't want to be involved with foreign affairs. So they backed out and worked on domestic problems, you know, and were isolated from the rest of the world, hence the name.
People started investing in the stock market, which, I mean, eventually led to the crash and the Great Depression, but people felt more confident with investing with their money.
And basically, this lasted up past the Depression all the way into World War II, where, of course, we were forced to enter into the war and help all the countries out.
Okay, so what were black people doing at the time?
Black people. Okay, so black people in the 1920s, there's this whole Harlem Renaissance period going on, and basically it has nothing to do with the Harlem Shake, but it's like a bunch of black people expressing themselves and like doing all this artistic stuff and all that fun stuff, and it was really, really cool. I mean, Langston Hughes, he was amazing. Like, he was a really, really good poet. Like, I think he said like something like, that justice is a blind goddess is a thing to which we blacks are wise, that her bandage hides two festering sores that once perhaps were eyes, or something like that. I don't really know. I don't really read.
Well, the Harlem Renaissance was an incredible time, actually. It was basically a burst of African Americans putting out their artistic expression, which basically started in Harlem, New York. And this came out with many artists that we know nowadays: Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, great jazz musicians. And basically it was the first time black people, or African Americans, were really able to, you know, express themselves, and it was okay. You know, I mean, people were still afraid of black people a lot of the time, but it was the first time they kind of crept out of their oppression.
Now, it's my understanding that your mother was alive in the 20s, and do you remember anything growing up about the way she would behave or her, you know, stance on prohibition?
Well, my mother was quite a conservative during the time. I remember when I was very young, she always had a negative view of alcohol. She was definitely loved the idea of prohibition. She would always say to us, you know, don't drink alcohol, it causes problems in the family and abuse to everyone else, to your children and to your spouse. She used to say to us, it tastes like dirt water. There's no driving likeness to the drink, you know, and she'd say, dirt water, don't taste it. And for years, you know, I was scared of it, and I mean, once I did taste it, I didn't think it tasted like dirt water. As a mother and a wife in the 20s, I'm for prohibition, of course. Alcohol is toward men, and not only that, but it causes abuse and families to break up. I mean, the only place you can really get alcohol is in saloons, and God knows that's barbaric, and I would never want to go into there. If alcohol was meant for women, of course I would drink it and want to, well, get away during the day, get away some of my stress, but no, it's just not necessary, so I believe in prohibition all the way.
Cheers. That is some good dirt water.
Okay, so what is your opinion on prohibition during the 1920s?
Prohibition? Okay. Let me just make something clear to you about prohibition, okay? Prohibition is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the country ever. I mean, like, except maybe besides slavery, because that was pretty, but I mean, you know, of course I don't want to mess with slavery. That was really bad. But I mean, besides that, okay, prohibition is just terrible. Like, I mean, I was thinking the other day, like, what if Samuel Adams found out about that? He would be so mad, you know, he'd probably be rolling over in his grave, and he'd be thinking, like, what are they doing to my country? What are they doing to my Constitution? You know, why is these crazy women? I don't understand this, because I'm a founding father, and I'm an American brewer, and prohibition is un-American, and it's wrong, and it's bad for capitalism, and it's bad for everything. It's bad for people's happiness. I could tell you that. And, you know, I agree with Samuel Adams, because he's a very smart man, and he's just trying to do a good job in this country, and prohibition is just like, I don't understand why people will ruin it with their stupid ideas, you know? That's what I think, personally. Look! Wait, I'm going to show you how it was boiling.
Oh my god.
It is a dirt pot!
It's a witch's brew.
What? Out alcohol! There's gotta be dirt coming out of my mouth whenever I drink this dirt water. You wanna be sure that you get all the good stuff. Now this is really, really hot, so we're gonna put it in the freezer for a few minutes to cool
I think I'm gonna
down.
barf.
I don't know where we can put it in here. Just, you know, where everything's okay. Okay, cheers.